I'm Malia Cook, and in my audience today I have Kelby Hill, Abby Dorton, David Keithley, Garrett Keithley, Anna Bishop, and recording is Hallie Keithley. Today I'm going to be talking about the effects violent media has on children. There is often question about whether or not violence in media makes a person more violent. Kids are the biggest concern as they seem to be the most involved in the media. It has been suggested that exposure to media violence is just one of several factors that can contribute to the development of aggressive behavior. Catherine Newman, Dean of Arts and Science at Johns Hopkins University, wrote, "Millions of young people who play video games that are full of fights, blazing guns, and body slams, yet only a minuscule fraction of the consumers become violent." Virtually since the dawn of television, parents, teachers, and legislators have wanted to understand the impact of television programs, particularly on children. Psychologists have found that children who have watched many hours of violence on TV when they were in elementary school tended to show higher levels of aggressive behavior when they become teenagers. A healthy person who is well-rounded that starts to watch many hours of violent movies or TV shows is more likely not going to become a criminal, but could possibly have a negative impact on that person. Research has shown that exposure to media violence can desensitize people to violence in the real world, meaning that kids might think that because they have seen violence on TV or in media that looks so real, these things are okay. For some people, watching violence in the media is enjoyable. The National Institute of Mental Health identified that major violent crimes come from the effect of seeing violence on TV. Media violence is only one of many risk factors for later aggression or violent behavior. After so many hours of watching violent TV programs and movies, a child will become immune to the fact that the violence that they are watching is wrong or illegal. A child sees a person that they look up to committing crimes or hurting people. This is very influential to them as a young mind. Special concern has been the portrayal of violence specifically given by psychologist Albert Biora's work in 1970 on social learning and the tendency of children to imitate what they see. 97% of today's adolescents, ages 12 to 17, play video games. The teenagers playing these games have very vulnerable minds that are very influential at this age. Many of those popular video games, such as Call of Duty and Grand Theft Auto, are violent. However, as video game technology is relatively new, there are fewer empirical studies of video game violence than other forms of media violence. Both games are full of aggression and violent actions. They include things like killing people, theft, blowing things up, and holding people hostage. Video game technology is advancing rapidly, and the games that parents let their kids play every day for hours are becoming more and more frighteningly realistic with each generation. In 2007, a group reported on a longitudinal study of violent video games. The study required children and their peers to explain to their teachers about the aggressive behavior in violent media. The researchers found that boys and girls who played a lot of video games changed over the school year, becoming more aggressive. Even in such a short period of time, there was a noticeable change in the children. If the child were to keep up their constant gaming habit for the next 10 years or so, imagine what kind of change they could see in a more extended time period. Although these are studies that claim to prove they have conducted almost the exact same test and not seen any change at all, in contrast, a study was published this year by Ferguson and his colleagues, 7 of which followed 165 boys and girls ages 10 to 14 over 3 years. And they found no long-term link between violent video games and youth aggression or dating violence. In a study like this, the contributing factors must be taken into consideration: age, personal life, and mental health. These all play a huge role when discussing the topic. Not every child is going to pick up on these aggressive behaviors or violent actions, but some may, especially at such a young age. During the teen years, most kids are figuring out what is right and what is wrong and who they want to be. We are constantly surrounded by things that influence us in many ways. If a teenager's main focus is playing brutal video games every day, then violence clearly interests them and is something that they will more likely pick up on. Much like the shooting in Colorado, 2 teenage boys who were murdered who murdered 12 schoolmates and teachers and injured 21 others at Columbian High School in Colorado before killing themselves, lived in a pathological environment. Their lives had before been centered around violent video games. Social media is recently becoming more violent through sites like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, etc. Social media is being filled with negative comments and posts daily, possibly being because he or she feels more comfortable being able to hide behind a screen or not actually have to say whatever it is to that person. Anger is particularly contagious on social media. Seeing rude or abusive words filling other people's computers could affect someone's behavior in a negative way. Children may be more likely to behave in an aggressive or harmful way towards others. Some mentally ill individuals are vulnerable to dramatized violence. They are naturally more vulnerable because they are in the community. They are sick that they may misinterpret something. Constantly reading unpleasant media may cause a child to become less sensitive to the pain or suffering of others, not to mention the news reporting all of the tragedies that happen every day, like shootings, mass murders, bombings, etc. This could make children become fearful of the world around them. As time progresses, we find it to be more common to turn on the TV and see violent crimes being committed and think nothing about it because they are becoming so used to it. Letting kids play video games just to entertain them may not be a great decision a few years down the road. Social media even throws extreme content in our faces constantly. When people turn on their favorite show or start playing what they think is the coolest video game ever, most would not think it could lead to anything dangerous or harmful. Some would be surprised.